They hunted the last human ship, but it carried an alien princess. The Vigilant was not built to carry the weight of a civilization's last hope, yet here it was, drifting on the fractured edge of the Orion Rim, its engines coughing against the strain of constant pursuit, its crew hollow-eyed with exhaustion, its steel bones scarred from a dozen near-death encounters, and still it carried within its hull the last remnants of humanity, soldiers, refugees, children born in space who had never seen the green of Earth or the oceans of Mars, all of them clinging to survival while the shadow of extinction stretched over every star they passed, for behind them like wolves were the hunting packs of the Zyri Empire, relentless in their determination to annihilate the species they had deemed unworthy to share the galaxy. And for weeks the Vigilant had been little more than prey, darting through dead systems and hiding among asteroid fields, its signals masked, its energy signatures muted, but even prey can carry a secret, and the secret within this battered vessel was one that could set fire to the whole empire. The alien princess, daughter of the Zyri High Throne, stolen from the heart of their dominion not as ransom nor leverage, but as a desperate gamble by a dying species who had nothing left to lose. She was not kept in chains, though some on board demanded she should be, nor locked behind steel doors, though the danger she represented was more than enough reason to bury her in the deepest brig the Vigilant possessed. Instead she was given a narrow cabin near the captain's quarters, guarded not by locks but by silence, for most of the crew could not bring themselves to look upon her, with her silver-hued skin that shimmered faintly beneath the ship's harsh lighting, her eyes burning with a violet glow that seemed both regal and alien, and her posture so utterly calm that it enraged those who had lost everything, because how could a princess of the monsters who had burned Earth sit in silence as if the screams of billions were not etched upon her empire's history? Yet she did, and Captain Arden Locke, a man who carried Earth's ashes behind his eyes, was the only one who dared speak to her. He had led the raid that had taken her, not as vengeance but as strategy, for in her veins lay a bloodline the Empire could not ignore, and in her presence lay a question that even his fractured crew whispered in mess halls and engine bays. Why had she not cried for rescue? Why had the Armada not destroyed them instantly when they could have? Why was this ship still alive when logic demanded it should already be drifting as frozen debris? And though he could not answer his crew, Locke asked the princess himself in nights heavy with silence, when the hum of the engines was the only sound, and she would meet his gaze with eyes that saw too deeply and reply with words that gave him neither peace nor clarity, "Because I chose this ship, and because your survival is tied to mine." The Princess Lyra did not explain more, and Locke did not push her, though the weight of her presence only grew heavier as the alien hunters closed in, and each battle became bloodier than the last. The crew resented her, some cursed her openly, others spat at the ground when she passed, for they had buried families in fire because of her kind, and yet there were moments, small, fragile moments, when they saw something beyond the alien in her, like when she bent quietly to help an injured child in the med bay, her long fingers glowing faintly as she stabilized a failing pulse, or when she walked among the dead in the hangar after a brutal skirmish, her expression unreadable but her hands brushing each human body as if honoring them. Locke saw it most clearly. She was not their prisoner and perhaps not even their enemy, but she was certainly a key to something far larger than their ship, though whether salvation or ruin he could not yet tell. And so the Vigilant fled, hiding its broken hull behind dust clouds, threading blackened nebulae, and carrying its impossible secret as the alien hunters circled closer each day, and in the void between pursuit and survival, humanity's last ship became the fulcrum of a story that would decide not only if their kind lived or died, but if the galaxy itself would fracture beneath the weight of a bond no one could have foreseen, the bond between the hunted and the alien princess who had chosen to share their fate. The first true stand came at the edge of the Perseid grave, a shattered star system littered with the bones of ancient wars, wrecks drifting like tombstones in the dark, and there the Vigilant tried to vanish among the dead, but the Zyri had tracked them too closely, and within hours the horizon flared with the arrival of 3 Predator-class cruisers, their sleek forms cutting through the debris like blades, their weapons warming, their comms crackling with promises of annihilation if the ship did not yield their stolen prize, and for the first time since they had stolen the princess, the Vigilant turned not to run but to fight, because running had stripped them to bone, and bone alone would not survive. The battle was a slaughterhouse of metal and will, human fighters screaming from the launch bays in desperate charges, their railguns lighting up the void, their shields buckling under the alien counterfire, and within the command deck Captain Locke stood steady, issuing orders through the storm, his voice iron even as sparks cascaded from ruptured panels, while the crew fought with a desperation born not of hope but of the certainty that this was the place where their species would either make a mark or fade. In the midst of that chaos, the alien princess did something no one expected. She walked into the bridge, unguarded, uninvited, her presence freezing the crew mid-task, and in a voice calm as a blade drawn from its sheath she said, "I can end this battle. But only if you trust me." Rage and suspicion erupted instantly, officers snarling that she was a spy, a saboteur, that she would signal her people and doom them all, but Locke, eyes burning, cut through the noise with a single command for silence. And in that silence Lyra approached the tactical console, her violet eyes glowing brighter as her fingers hovered above the alien script scrolling across the enemy comms they had intercepted, and she explained, almost softly, that the pursuers were not merely hunters but executioners, bound by her empire's will to return her alive at all costs, and that their ships could be forced into hesitation if she revealed herself, not as prisoner but as sovereign, for she was not merely a princess of title but heir to a bloodline that carried the empire's deepest codes of command. Locke hesitated, torn between the risk of betrayal and the certainty of destruction. But in the end he gambled as all humans must when the odds are already impossible, and he gave her the comms channel. What followed was a moment burned into the memory of every survivor aboard the Vigilant. Lyra's voice ringing through the void, speaking in the sharp, melodic language of the Zyri, her tone imperious, commanding, and when the enemy ships faltered, their weapons dimming, their advance slowing, it was as if the very stars themselves had held their breath. For against all logic the alien warships obeyed, their formation breaking, their pursuit momentarily frozen. Locke seized the moment, ordering the Vigilant through the debris, weaving a desperate escape route while the hunters hesitated. Torn between duty to their empire and the voice of the bloodline they could not deny, and for a heartbeat humanity's last ship escaped death not through steel or fire but through the will of the alien princess standing among them, her expression unreadable, her loyalty to neither side spoken but undeniably real. And yet as they slipped once more into the dark, Locke saw the eyes of his crew, saw the fracture widening. Some now believed the princess was their salvation, others that she was their doom, and between those beliefs stretched a tension sharper than any alien blade. The war was no longer only against the Zyri. It was now within the Vigilant itself. The final chase began in silence, broken only by the groaning of the ship's bulkheads as the Resolute tore through a debris field near the ruins of a forgotten colony, the alien princess standing beside Captain Elias on the bridge, her luminous eyes fixed on the tactical display that bloomed with crimson markers, each one a hunter ship closing in, each one a reminder that their time was running out. And though every crew member aboard knew they were outnumbered, though their fuel reserves dwindled and their weapons banks strained with overuse, none spoke of surrender, for in the days since they had fled across empty systems, the alien princess had become more than a secret, more than a burden. They had seen her sit with the wounded, sing in her strange tongue to calm frightened engineers, offer knowledge of enemy formations that kept them alive, and in turn she had seen their stubborn defiance, their refusal to let the last of humanity die in silence, and in this unlikely bond a new kind of purpose had taken root. So when the sensor chief whispered that the enemy flagship had deployed its boarding wings, silence fell heavier than vacuum, and Elias knew the truth. There would be no more running, they would have to make their stand here in this graveyard of wrecked worlds. Orders flew, terse and sharp, hands moved with the precision of desperation, and the Resolute angled its scarred hull into a defensive orbit around the shattered planet below, its atmosphere leaking into space like a wound, while across the void the alien armada fanned out, hundreds of ships tightening the noose, their massive flagship dominating the center with a cruel elegance, its golden hull gleaming with the pride of conquest, its cannons already warming, and over comms a voice boomed in. Their alien tongue demanding the return of the princess, promising swift death if they resisted. But Elias only glanced at her, and she shook her head slowly, her eyes glistening with tears that refused to fall, for she knew what surrender would mean. She had seen her people execute defectors without mercy, had seen what her father's empire did to those who reached for freedom, and she whispered, "If I go back, your people die anyway." And in that moment Elias decided, not just as a captain, but as the last human commander, that they would not hand her over, they would fight, and if they fell they would fall as more than prey, they would fall as defiance incarnate. The battle ignited with a fury that shook the stars, alien cruisers firing beams that sliced across the void, ripping into the Resolute's shields, while human gunners retaliated with missile salvos and railgun bursts, shattering two smaller frigates that came too close, their wreckage spinning like burning confetti across the black. But for every enemy that fell, 5 more pressed in, their formations tightening like the jaws of a trap. And yet the crew fought on, every explosion, every counterstrike carrying the weight of Earth itself, as though all the voices of the dead echoed in their defiance, and as decks shuddered and alarms screamed, Elias moved like a man carved from iron, his voice steady even when the navigation deck erupted in sparks, even when the starboard batteries went silent, and beside him the alien princess never wavered, her hand sometimes brushing his shoulder, anchoring him, whispering tactical warnings about enemy patterns that saved them seconds before annihilation, until at last the enemy flagship itself unleashed its fury, a beam of annihilation that lanced forward like the judgment of gods, tearing across the void toward the battered human vessel. And in that moment time slowed, every heart aboard the Resolute knowing this was the end, but Elias gave one last order, his voice raw but unbroken, all power to forward shields. In the main gun. Fire everything we have. The ship screamed as energy was rerouted, lights dimming, life support faltering, even the gravity struggling as reactors overloaded, but the great forward cannon, patched 100 times, scarred and weary like the crew that manned it, surged with final life, and the Resolute fired, a blinding spear of molten tungsten tearing through the void, colliding with the alien flagship's beam in a clash of light so vast it painted the dead planet below in fire, the impact shaking space itself, shredding lesser ships caught in the blast, and when the flare cleared, the Resolute still floated, broken and bleeding but alive, while the alien flagship reeled, its golden hull fractured, its core leaking fire like a dying star, and silence hung across the battlefield, stunned disbelief radiating from the enemy fleet. But Elias did not waste it, ordering ramming speed, and though the crew gasped, they obeyed for they understood, and the Resolute charged, its engines screaming their last breath, streaking across the void like a blade of vengeance, crashing into the heart of the alien flagship with an explosion that outshone the stars, tearing through its reactor, igniting a chain reaction that split the giant vessel apart, and with it the command structure of the Armada. In the aftermath, drifting survivors aboard lifeboats watched as the alien fleet faltered, some breaking formation, others retreating, confusion spreading through their ranks like wildfire, for the destruction of the flagship was not just a tactical loss. It was symbolic, the impossible act of defiance they had thought beneath humanity now burning before their eyes, and into that vacuum of fear the alien princess spoke, transmitting across all channels, her voice ringing clear in her people's tongue, declaring she was alive, declaring she had chosen humanity, declaring that the Empire's cruelty would no longer bind her. And in that speech something shattered across the stars, for some of the alien crews began to turn away, began to question, began to break free, while others fled in silence, unwilling to face the new future she embodied, and for the first time in generations the human survivors aboard scattered ships felt hope. The wreckage of the Resolute floated in silence, its hull a grave for those who had given everything, its captain gone, but his legacy alive in the defiance he had carved into history, and in one lifeboat sat the alien princess, clutching the battered insignia Elias had pressed into her palm before the ramming run, tears running silently down her face as she whispered his name into the void, not as a commander, not as a savior, but as the man who had shown her what courage truly was. And when the surviving humans gathered around her, bruised, broken, but alive, she rose and vowed that his sacrifice would not be forgotten, that humanity would not be forgotten, that she would carry both their stories into the heart of the galaxy, not as a prisoner, not as a daughter of conquest, but as the voice of two peoples who had found hope in the ashes. And as the lifeboat engines carried them into the uncertain dark, the wreckage of the Resolute glimmered behind like a star, and though silence reigned, the universe itself seemed to whisper the truth. Humanity had been hunted, cornered, nearly erased, but in their last stand they had defied extinction, and because of one ship, one crew and one captain, the story was not over, it was only beginning.